And now the question becomes how? How am I going to plant my garden? Am I going to do, and really when you're talking about the how, you're really talking about, I guess, essentially three kind of major ways that you can plant your garden. You can, number one, do a raised bed. Number two, you can plant in ground. And number three, you can do containers. And each comes with its own set of challenges and difficulties and obstacles to overcome, as well as its advantages. So I want to go over a few advantages of each. So when it comes down to growing your own food, I really want to narrow it down to three different ways to grow your own food. First one, where we start talking about the how, is essentially direct sowing into the God-given earth that you've been blessed with. Now, the upside to that is super simple. You just break up, loosen the soil, throw the seeds in the soil and water. It can be cost efficient because really all you're talking about is maybe every now and then, depending on how large area, is tilling in some organic material. And that can be anywhere from manure, chicken poo, coffee grounds, and or leaves. However, one of the challenges with direct sowing is that you might have to make the initial time and money investment to break up the soil depending on your location. So you may have to turn the soil over, loosen the soil if you got hard clay soil or rocky soil to be able to even make it workable to begin with. And depending on your soil structure and your soil nutrients present in your soil, you may have to amend it heavily to also be able to get it to be workable. And the way you find out what's in your soil is simply go to your local ag extension, and they can provide you with an extensive soil sample to tell you what's in your soil to see if you need to amend your soil. So those are some of the challenges, just depending on where you're growing at, that you may come across. And the second thing we have is essentially raised bed gardening. Raised bed, the pros is that it's completely customizable. I can build it to whatever length, whatever height, whatever size or depth that I want it. I can make an L shape, U shape. It's completely customizable for your unique situation. You also have full control over your soil. So instead of having to work with the soil you have, you can actually build your soil to whatever your requirements for whatever you're growing. So if I'm growing blueberries and I want a highly acidic soil structure, I can start with a completely highly acidic soil mix so that I'm not having to amend the soil. Raised beds also have the advantage of being able to be installed on any type of surface. So if I want to put them in my backyard over the grass, I can do that. If I don't have a backyard and all I have is a back patio, I can build my raised bed on top of my back patio. So those are kind of its advantages. Now, the downsides to raised gardening bed is that it can get expensive depending on the materials that you use to build your raised bed with, how you want it to look, and also the filling it with the soil. So the deeper you go with the bed, the more soil you'll have to do. And I'll have a video on how to fill your raised garden beds up for free, and that will help mitigate the cost. Also, building the raised garden beds, depending on how you're building them, may require a basic kind of handyman DIY knowledge and a basic set of tools like maybe a hammer and a drill if you don't already have those. So if you don't have a good skill set of putting things together, you may have more frustration with raised garden beds. Unless you go with the prefab kits where they're pretty much everything's all put together like Legos and screws. However, those prefab kits can cost a pretty penny. So now you're right back to the cost disadvantage. The third thing I want to discuss is container gardening. Container gardening is super simple. It's completely portable, so I can move it to my front, my back. I can bring it in for the winter. Customizable. You can have a little bitty 2 foot by 2 foot area and you can still grow something with a container garden. However, the downsides to growing in containers is that you have limited depth. You can only grow things that don't require a great amount of root depth. So you're limited to what you can grow as far as that. And you can get bigger pots. However, bigger pots are going to be more expensive. Another thing is that the quality of your pots could also cost you a penny. So depending where you're at, like in here in Texas, the sun gets really hot. The UV rays will break down just about any plastic material that you put out there. So you have to have something that is really durable to withstand the UV rays of the Texas heat. So in order to get something like that, you may have to invest in a little bit more to get better quality pots that will stand the test of time. And that can be expensive. Again, if you want to grow bigger things like patio, container, trees, you may have to get deeper 5-10 gallon pots, which now you're looking at cost issue of it. Bigger pots cost more money. Also the portability issue of it. Bigger pots, I can't really move them around like I can smaller pots. So essentially, those are your 3 different kind of ways to grow once you come to this point. And really, there's no best way. It's really what's best for you. How much time, how much money, how much skill do you have? And what is, going back to my very first video in this series, what is your why for wanting to grow your own food? Once you kind of figure that, you'll kind of decide, come to a conclusion of what works best for you. Now for me, I like raised bed gardens, mainly because my unique situation is that not only do I have clay soil, I have heavy rocks in my soil. So I have to start digging and really working to get all the rocks out of the soil, and then amending and building that soil back up, which I could, just don't have the time to. Somewhere else might not be that big of a deal. Get a tiller out there, start pulling the rocks up, dump a bunch of soil and mulch and leaves, and 2 seasons you can actually grow in the ground. It really just depends on what works for you, because again, gardening don't got to be complicated or expensive. Just got to get out and start growing something. Now what I want you to do, I want you to go to the comments and I want you to tell me which method you prefer, and tell me your why. Why do you prefer the method that you're using? And then also list some of your pros and cons in the method that you choose.